Dear MCCSC teachers, my name is Mark K. Winston, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. In recognition of Teacher Appreciation Week, I'd like to say thank you for all that you do each and every day on behalf of our students. Please know, I hope you know, that your hard work, your dedication, and your commitment to our children does not go unnoticed. I would also like to thank you for how hard you have worked these past 8 weeks as we very quickly had to pivot to support our students during this pandemic. Your response to our corporation-wide contingency learning plan has been nothing short of amazing, and I do mean amazing. You are truly to be commended for how you have creatively, very creatively, and very flexibly supported our students. Our community is extremely appreciative of your efforts. I have heard story after story after story about some of the unique ways in which you have reached out to your students, you've found ways to have them engaged, and that you've just checked in on your students to make sure that they're okay and that their families are okay. So thank you for that work. The purpose of today's webinar is to make sure that each of you are fully informed of the year-long project around curriculum that we have been engaged in throughout the 2019-2020 school year. As you may know, we've been working on revising our corporation's essential learnings, our ELs, and updating our common formative assessments and our common summative assessments since last fall. Many teachers across multiple grade levels throughout every school in our corporation have contributed in one way or another, and honestly, we are very grateful and we are indebted to them. This session is dedicated to providing you with an overview of the 3rd through 6th grade CFAs and CSAs. There are just a few key objectives for today's webinar that should assist in making sure that we are all on the very same page. As a result of today's session, you should, 1, have a thorough understanding of this year-long project, as well as knowing what best practices we were using to guide our work. 2, you should also have an awareness of depth of knowledge, proficiency scales, and all the changes that are being made to the corporation's CFAs and CSAs. 3, I hope that you'll have a better understanding of how to grade our CFAs and CSAs so that we've got consistency and continuity from classroom to classroom. 4, you will also know how to access your grade-specific CFAs and CSAs through Canvas. And 5, you will learn how to conduct and how to grade your assessments in Canvas. We've packed a lot of information into this session, and we hope that you find it to be beneficial. If at the conclusion of today's session, you still have questions or you need some additional clarity, simply reach out to the instructional coach in your building. Don't hesitate to do that. You can always reach out to one of our district instructional coaches as well. Earlier, I mentioned that this has been a year-long process. This slide here highlights the timeline that we followed during the past school year. Prior to talking about the timeline, I do want to highlight for you 2 key themes that guided the work that we've been doing and that we have done all school year. Those themes are transparency and teacher engagement. Transparency, it was very important to us, it is very important to us that the work that we're doing is transparent so that everyone knows exactly what we're doing and how we're proceeding with the work. In order to have transparency, you have to have communication. And we've worked diligently to communicate as consistently and as regularly as possible. And yet and still, it's never enough. Teacher engagement. We can't do this work alone. We cannot do this work without the expertise of teachers. Teachers who are on the front lines, teachers who are in front of our students each and every day. We're very proud of the fact that as we have done this work, we've been able to document over 400 hours of teacher dedicated time to helping us write, look at, review, modify, finalize our ELs, our proficiency skills, our CFAs, and our CSAs. And to be perfectly honest with you, we think that 400 hours is probably a drop in the bucket of actual teacher time that was spent helping with this work. So thank you to everyone. We know that we had teachers back in the fall, back in September, when you were working alongside your PLCs, looking at the essential learnings and helping to reprioritize them. If you'll recall, we asked you to take 1 or 2 PLC meetings and review every essential learning and let us know whether we should keep it, whether we should throw it out, whether we should make some kind of a modification. That really put us on the right course in doing this work. So thank you for that. We began also in the month of October looking at our proficiency scales. We began creating them for grades 3 through 8, and we could not have created them. We had an initial version, and then we talked with several teachers. And guess what? As a result of that, we had a better version. And so the proficiency skills that you now see are directly as a result of very concrete, specific, expert feedback and guidance that we received from teachers. We heard them, we listened, we responded. At our November Professional Development Day, we began to roll some of this information out so that we could gather some additional feedback. So we did some additional modifications, and we created some additional sessions, or excuse me, we created some additional CFAs and CSAs that we rolled out in January and December for our teachers to begin using. And then in February, well, actually in January and February, excuse me, we also started looking at the K2 PLCs, looking at their essential learnings at that particular point in time. And in February, the K2 teachers prioritized their essential learnings, and grades 3 through 8 began finalizing some of their work. So as you can see, there's a lot of work that's been compressed in just a short period of time, and we're very excited about that work. As we did this work, we also knew that it would be very important for us to have some clear-cut guidelines for how we would collect and respond to teacher and principal feedback. This slide here highlights a couple of those key areas. Understand that our #1 priority is to have in your hands on day 1 of the new school year every CFA, every CSA, every reprioritized essential learning, all of the proficiency skills. We want that in your hand, not the 2nd day of school, not the 3rd day of school, not the 5th week of school, but day 1. So before school starts, we want all of this in place. In order for us to fulfill that requirement, we need teachers' final review the week of May 11th through the 15th. Once we get your final review, the curriculum and instruction team is going to make the final edits. Those final edits will be made during the week of May 18th through the 24th. During the summertime, we're going to take all of those assessments, make sure that we apply the technology enhancements to those assessments, and get them all uploaded into Canvas so that when you return to school in the fall, you have all of that. We will continually have a cycle of feedback so that we know where we continue to need to make revisions. So you will always have that opportunity. And at this time next year, we'll make any additional revisions that we will have gathered information from you throughout the upcoming school year. Feedback submission. There's a Google Doc that's been created, and we want you to put all of your feedback there so that we can document it, and then we can make sure that we've addressed each and every piece of feedback. Some pieces of feedback we will easily be able to incorporate and make those modifications. Other pieces of feedback, we may need to hold off, and maybe we won't be able to make them right away, but every piece of feedback will be reviewed. And understand that even though we know that you are giving us your best thinking, we may not be able to get everything included. So we just want you to be aware of that, but everything will absolutely be reviewed. And finally, how to access your assessments. you will be able to contact your instructional coaches, and they will make sure that you are added to the grade level Canvas course that you teach. And so in closing, just want to mention to you that there were several factors, and there are several factors that guide our final decision making. Those factors are, one, making sure that the products that we put out are directly in alignment with the Department of Education standards as well as their proficiency skills. Two, you took your precious time to tell us what the essential learnings need to be, and my commitment to you is to make sure that you know we listened and we are incorporating those essential learnings into everything that we're doing. Number three, we've got to make sure that the depth of knowledge that is newly being introduced here in Indiana in our state assessments, that we've got the proper level of DOK in our level 3 questions. We feel like we've done a pretty good job of that, but it's not going to be perfect. Not the first time out, it's never perfect, but we're working really hard to get to that level of perfection. Items 4, 5, and 6, I don't need to read those to you, but that's important as well. We want to make sure that we provide a mechanism for you to receive information that's going to guide your instruction within your classrooms. So thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. Lori Ely is one of our district instructional coaches, and she's going to take you through some assessment literacy information and provide you with some additional nuts and bolts details regarding our CFAs and our CSAs.
Hello, this is Lori Ely, District Instructional Coach. Assessment literacy includes 3 big ideas: what someone knows about assessment, what someone believes about assessment, and what someone does with assessment. AL is a student-centered teaching philosophy. It is built upon the growth mindset and incorporates best teaching practices into every aspect of teaching and learning. The AL philosophy facilitates cooperation between students, teachers, administrators, and parent guardians to support students in meeting the grade level learning targets. The benefits of using the AL philosophy are as follows. It helps teachers develop a classroom culture based on learning, not point accumulation or playing the game of school. It provides teachers with the structure to teach students take ownership of their learning. Teacher is viewed as a coach. Teacher enjoys collaborative, non-confrontational parent interactions. And teacher reports grades that are clear and defensible and reflect student learning progress towards the learning target. This chart was created to help explain expectations around the usage of CFAs and CSAs. First, it's important to understand that non-explicit teaching of standards could happen before the CFA or sample task in a number corner or classroom discussion. The sample task or CFA will then be given, and this data point will guide instruction. The score of the CFA will be the score on the report card as the benchmark. Then the lesson and unit activities will begin. These will be focused on the essential learning targets. Multiple opportunities for students to show and tell what they know will happen during this time, and ongoing informal assessment should happen during this time as well. And once the teacher feels that the class is 80% ready or more to go on to the CSA, they should administer the CSA. Understand too that during this time, mistakes are expected and seen as opportunities to learn. K-2 will give the CSA using paper copies, and 3-8 will be giving the CSAs using the Canvas Tech enhanced versions. If you have evidence of meeting the learning target, then the score will be, and the body of work, as well as this score, will be reported on the report card. And if not yet, you may have to go back to the lesson and unit activities. Now we'll talk about proficiency scales, depth of knowledge, and updates to CFAs and CSAs. Number 1, If this standard was combined with other standard, it's listed here, and it should also match the targets that you will see. Reminder, the proficiency scales column info was provided by the IDOE and are on their website. As well as if you click on the link here, it takes you to the IDOE ELA framework. Recently, there was a link here in the vocabulary provided that has a link to IDOE vocabulary. It has a long list of all the words in the definition for K to 12. And down here, the depth of knowledge is in level 3 only. 4 levels assesses DOK 1, 2, and 3 in level 3. Not explicit in sample tasks, but listed on all CFA and CSA documents. And you can click here as well to take you to some item specification sample items provided by the IDOE. Fluency for 3 to 5. Fluency cannot be assessed on Canvas, so teachers will need to use the paper copy of the assessment. These paper copies can be found in the grade level Canvas course. It looks like this. You'll see where it says printable CFAs and CSAs. You'll click on that, and then you'll notice when it's connected to this standard, underneath it, it has the RF.5 that you can click on, and that will be the paper copies that you can print. Now I will turn it over to Lauren Keenan, the other district instructional coach.
Thanks, Lori, for sharing about the ELA scales. I'm Lori's counterpart, MCCSC Corporation Instructional Coach, Lauren Nepacki Keenan. And before I go into some detail about the new exciting changes to the math scales, I wanted to share some more information about an exciting addition to both our ELA and our math scales, which is the incorporation of depth of knowledge. So we began this conversation at the beginning of this year after we analyzed the iLearn data, and we saw that the adaptive testing affords the opportunity for the test to really assess students' depth of knowledge with a particular standard. And so what does that mean exactly? Hopefully this image is not new to you. If it is, or if you have more questions about depth of knowledge after watching this video, I encourage you to follow up with your instructional coach to get more professional development around depth of knowledge, given it's really important to understanding the assessments. So basically, if we use the analogy of a baseball player or a softball player, to be a good baseball player or softball player in terms of hitting, you have to be able to hit more than one type of pitch. And so we've got 4 different pitches here, which are analogous to the different DOK levels that students are expected to be able to perform the standard at. And so it's important that we think about the standard being engaged with the student in lots of different ways. So students have to be able to not just answer like a rote recall type of question, which is a DOK 1, but they also should be able to explain it, which is more of a DOK 3 type of question. So we really want to make sure that students are prepared, not just for the iLearn, but really if these are essential learnings, we want to make sure students really, really, really understand that standard. And so this is going to give us that depth of knowledge that we want on those essential learnings. So that's going to give us that information. So in order to do that, we identified that at level 3, which would be the goal for all students to be at all of their ELs at a level 3 by the end of the school year, that they're at proficiency, we incorporated the DOKs at that level 3. We incorporated DOK 1, DOK 2, and DOK 3. DOK 1 are your recall memorization type of questions. DOK 2 are more explicit type of questions In math, we say that those are procedures without connections. And then DOK3 is where there's more implicit information that needs to be given. Students have to provide evidence in multiple ways or explain their answer. That's the strategic thinking or the procedures with connections that are required of a DOK3. We intentionally did not include a DOK4 in the level 3, and that's because, number one, when we went through our analysis, we noticed that not a lot of the standards were assessed at a level 4. But if we go back to our analogy, a good baseball or softball hitter is going to be able to hit 3 out of 4 pitches really well. They don't have to hit all 4 pitches really well to be considered proficient. So we wanted to make sure that we were true to that here. With that said, notice there's 2 questions in DOK1, there's 2 questions in DOK2, there's 3 questions in DOK3. They would have to answer all of these questions correctly in order to score a 3. And I'll share more about that information about grading in a future slide here in just a few minutes. But it's important to note, though, that to get a 3, they have to be proficient at all 3 DOK levels. So now I'm excited to share some updates to the math scales. Now, some of these updates are consistent between ELA and math, and so you might have heard them before from Lori and might be aware of them already, but I just want to highlight them because they really are phenomenal changes based on feedback that we've received over the years. So number 1 is that inclusion of that depth of knowledge. So in this level 3, that's the only place, and again, the level 3 matches the standard that's listed. This is the only place in which you're assessing the standard at 3 different levels, DOK 1, 2, and 3. However, on the sample tasks, and note that as a teacher, you can decide to give the sample tasks or the CFA to understand where students are at before you teach the lesson, to make sure that you're able to differentiate for the students in your classroom. You want to be able, unfortunately, because of the constraints of the size of the slide, we weren't able to put all 3 DOK level questions in this part of the sample task. And so therefore, if you want to see the different levels, we encourage you to look at the CFA. The other thing we've provided is the Indiana Department of Education has provided item specification sample items. We've incorporated some of these into our documents. However, you can see more than what we've put on this document, and usually they provide the DOK level of the particular question. Additionally, any math problem, you can change the DOK level, and so we've provided a resource here to be able to do that, for you to be able to do that. So check out those resources if you want more samples of DOK to give to your students in this particular standard. A reminder, the proficiency scales column is something that we took from the DOE. They provided the proficiency scales, and those are available on their website. In the notes section of the slide, we've put some important information to be able just to give more information about the particular standard. So for example, we've identified a process standard that goes with this particular standard really well, and information about why that was selected to go with this particular standard. We've also provided some content explanations if we've noticed that there was a misconception in a particular content area. Also, if we've wanted to be able to provide some ways to differentiate sample tasks, we've included that here. We're going to be updating these slides. You know, they're constantly going to be a work in progress. And anytime we get feedback from teachers that something needs to be added or changed, we're going to make sure to update that information below here in the slides so that we can keep track of what changes were made over time and the rationale behind that. Additionally, you'll notice that there's some yellow on this standard slide. It's important to note that yellow because in April of 2020, the IDOE put out new 2020 math standards. And anywhere you see yellow in the standard box on the slide is going to indicate that that was a change from the previous version of the standards. So in yellow is where you'll see a change. In this particular case, that part of the standard was removed, and we've provided at the end of the standard in brackets exactly what detail was changed. So you can see that there. We wanted just to make sure that all the ELs were reviewed in alignment with the 2020 standards. So they've all been updated accordingly. In the upper left-hand corner is going to be where you're going to find combining ELs. So we really listen to teacher feedback. When you determined at your grade levels earlier in the 2019-2020 school year, revamped your ELs and decided to recombine certain ELs, we really wanted to be intentional so that those CFAs and CSAs and the scales would be intentionally utilized. So what happened is in math, we looked to see what was the higher level skill, what was the building block skill or skills, and we wanted to make that information really clear. And so we put that information not just in the notes section, but also in the upper left-hand corner. Notice that only generally speaking, one of those standards is the EL. In this case, it's 3NS1 is the target, which is indicated by the target. However, if you notice that 3NS2 and 3NS9 are substandards of this particular standard. And so because of that, if a student is struggling at the level 3, you would want to go to look at the scales of those other two standards in order to make sure that the building blocks are met for them to be able to do the level 3 well. So we did that intentionally. We included that information so that to better support you in figuring out where to go in terms of the learning trajectory for students. As a reminder, we have linked the math IDOE framework with the particular standard. That's true for ELA as well. It's linked to the literacy framework, so you can click on that. As a reminder, we got from that framework the I can statements as well as some of the vocabulary and some of the examples we got from the documents that are linked in the math framework. The same way that the math framework is a living document, we wanted our scales to be living documents. So you'll notice we linked important documents that we think you should be able to access through this, which includes including a vocabulary list beyond just what the IDOE recommends. So you'll see that there is a hyperlinked, the vocabulary word here is hyperlinked to a Google Doc, which is also linked to a much bigger vocabulary page that is linked to your curriculum. So we've incorporated the Bridges vocabulary for grades K through 5, and we've incorporated the CMP language in grades 6 through 8. So we wanted to have kind of one resource for looking at vocabulary and not just limited to the Department of Education. With that said, we started to put the answers in red after the questions for the sample task, but we noticed that it was getting busy, and some of the feedback was that it's helpful to have the answers so we know the expectations for students, especially as we bring in other maybe para-professionals or special educators to work with our students to see our expectation for answers. However, to not make the sample task kind of too small in font and too messy, we pulled off the answers onto the slide, onto the side of the slide. You can see those will not print for you, so make sure that if you wanted to print them, you'd have to copy them to a Word document or, just have them up electronically to use them as a resource. The same is true of the notes. The notes won't print unless you make them print. The process standards are linked here. Scales, those are the scales. There's also some additional resources there. And those scales are important because for the very first time, we're going to be able to assess the process standards and not just look at the process standards and incorporate them. We're going to be able to see how our students are doing on those process standards. So I'll share with you that next. So with that said, incorporating the process standards was something that we have been trying to figure out how to do for the last school year, especially after the iLearn data came out and we looked across the grade levels and we saw that the process standards were being assessed, and we wanted to make that more tangible for us. So all 8 process standards should be taught in all grades of math. But when and where it's assessed is where it's kind of up in the air and fuzzy for everybody. So what we did was we wanted to look for a systemic way to attend to the process standards in a way that's going to be more meaningful, not just for students, but for teachers as well. We've highlighted here the 3 through 6th grade band. So notice by 3rd grade, all students will have been engaged in all 8 process standards. But what you should know is that the grades coming to you are going to really spend some time focusing very heavily on a strategic kind of influx of those standards. So in grade K, they're just going to focus on 2 of the process standards, PS6 and PS7. And then in grade 1, they'll add 2 more to that list. So they can really intentionally kind of focus on process standard 1 and 8, but then also continue to work with 6 and 7 that students should have a good grasp of. And in grade 2, then we would add 2 more, which is process standard 3 and 5. Now, we didn't just pick these randomly. A team of coaches looked through the Bridges curriculum and saw at which process standards really were in most of the lessons at your particular grade level, and that's how those were identified. So that by the time 3rd grade comes, you're not focusing on all 8 in depth, but rather you're focusing on 2 of them really in depth, and then the other 6 are really just part of their problem-solving abilities at that point. Remember, the process standards are problem-solving skills. So, we think it allows and affords the opportunity for students to really become familiar with the process standards in a way that they haven't before, and we think it's going to be helpful for teachers too. The process standards, there's going to be 1 process standard identified and graded on each of the CFAs, CSAs, and those are the same. So on one particular CFA, you would get the same process standard on each CFA and CSA. The reality is we already had the process standards in our CFAs and CSAs before. We just found a way to collect the data and to make it more accessible. And you should know that this is groundbreaking. Nobody else is assessing the process standards like this. This is the first time that we're doing it, and we're trying to make it really transparent. So hopefully this becomes good information to share with families, as well as to help continue to build problem solvers in your classroom. In order to be able to evaluate the process standards, we had to create a scale and a rubric. And so for each of the process standards you saw in the content scale that I shared earlier, that there was a link over on the right-hand bottom to the scales. This is what the scale for PS1 looks like. All the scales look like this in some way, shape, or form. They have the standard as well as a link to the corresponding IDOE document for that particular process standard. We also have the vocabulary as well. What you'll notice is that it looks a little bit different in terms of we have student look-fors, we have sample task look-fors, and we have teacher action look-fors. And what you'll notice is it looks like check boxes. And that's intentional because a student's a 3 if they're you're mostly checking off boxes here. Or a student's a 2 if you're mostly checking off boxes here as you look at their work. We hope that as teachers utilize these scales, it just becomes more common and you almost don't even have to look at them to be able to say if they're a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, especially since they stay the same year to year. So I'm going to start with sharing what's in the sample task look-fors. So basically these descriptors primarily are used by teachers. In order for a student to be able to perform at proficiency for this process standard, they have to be given tasks that allow them to do that. So for example, if a student is given a level 2 task, something that's really overly scaffolded and only requires students to kind of plug and chug, that's a task that's never going to allow for them to perform at a level 3. So we need to make sure that our tasks are at this level 3 for students to be able to perform at a level 3. I've provided in this look-fors document some links to the Inside Mathematics websites, which shows videos and has additional process standards information, as well as a resource that shows how you can kind of modify any lesson to incorporate some of the standards. So check out those resources if you want some more ideas for how to modify sample tasks. Additionally, we have teacher look-fors in terms of action. So this column is really to be used by teachers when you're planning lessons or when you're evaluating a lesson. Again, if your teacher actions don't support students doing the things in the student look-fors column, then they're never going to be able to perform at a level 3. Remember, a quick way to think about the content standards is that's the what you are teaching, and the process standards are how you are teaching and how you're engaging students in the content. So it's really important to be able to identify in your teacher actions that you're setting students up to be able to actually show those process standards being met. Lastly, the look-fors in student work. This is how students are engaging in the tasks that you've designed for them. This is where the meat of the process standard is going to be evaluated. We want students to be performing at that level 3. And so this is how you can evaluate if they've performed at proficiency for their tasks. This is the expected norm. We want students to be performing in the green. The level 4, the above proficiency, it's important to note it does include all of the previous columns to be a level 4. So that is not necessarily true of the level 3. You don't have to get all the 2 and all the 1 to be a level 3, but to be a level 4, you really need to have all of the previous skills met. If you take a look at the I can statements and the question stems, those are resources to use to kind of help with modifying tasks or to think about in terms of teacher actions so that the student look-fors, again, are going to be there. So where are these process standards on our CFAs and CSAs? So on the bottom of every CFA and CSA is the grading scale that's put there. Again, if you go back to the process standard scale, which by the way, every scale is linked. So this is the process standard is linked here, that you can go to that process standard scale 6 to be able to see. You want to kind of look at the checkbox and see, are they more a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, where are their checks landing to help identify where they're at. Remember, on the scales, the content scales, we also put kind of what's the information we want to be looking for. So for example, process standard 6 is about tending to precision. So we're going to be looking to see in this measurement, did they attend to the units correctly? Did they give the correct answer? Were they precise with their language? Those are all things that are noted in the scale to determine if they're a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. We want to make sure that those match the scale. Currently, there are no plans to include these process standards or problem-solving skills on your report card, but we think that this is good information and good data for you to assess and collect on students to help better prepare them to make sure they're able to engage in the questions and the process standards as competently as the content. In terms of supporting teachers in kind of recording this information, Katie is gonna share with you next some information about grading on Canvas, some exciting news about using grading, but we wanted to also provide another resource to help with recording and keeping track of students' progress in a particular EL. And so we've provided these recording sheets for all teachers in all grade levels, K through 8. And so if you go to your Canvas site that Katie's going to walk us through in a few minutes, you're going to see that there's a teacher recording sheet. This is totally optional to use, and it looks like this. We've linked them both in your scales documents as well as right here in your Canvas. And you could save it to your Google Drive and modify it as you want, but you can keep data on students throughout their particular standard in one place if that's helpful for you. Again, it's just a resource we've been requested at the lower grade levels, and we wanted to provide it for 3 through 8 as well. So let's now talk about grading the CFAs and the CSAs on the 4-point scale. We heard from teachers when we started this process that there was a lot of confusion around what makes a 3 and what makes a 2. And then some people were giving half points, and then a decision was made, no half points. But then we heard feedback that teachers really thought, wow, there's a really large gap between 2 and 3, and students are making progress between 2 and 3, but their score might not indicate it. So we wanted to think intentionally about how we could support teachers in being more consistent in grading, and then also incorporate those half points again. Please note that everything that I'm going to be saying in terms of the flow chart matches what can be done on Canvas, which is really, really exciting. So we are going to be sharing with you a grading flow chart that will take out some of the subjectivity around grading the CFAs and the CSAs. I'm going to start with sharing the CSA grading flow chart. We would imagine for the first few times when you are grading CSAs that you would have this flow chart out, but eventually, since it's the same for all CSAs, you would kind of know it by heart. We've received feedback from teachers that have used this as a pilot this year, and they really thought the flow chart took out the is a student a 2 or is a student a 3, that it took out that subjectivity and made them feel more confident in the grades that they were giving to students. So with that said, the CSAs have level 2, 3, and 4 questions on it. We did not include level 1 questions on the CSA because if they're not a level 2, then we know that they're at a level 1. So we didn't want to ask more questions than we had to. If they are not getting the level 2 question correctly, we're going to still have you grade and score the level 3 questions. And remember, I showed you earlier that the level 3 questions, there are essentially 3 buckets. There's the DOK 1 bucket, the DOK 2 bucket, and the DOK 3 bucket. Now remember earlier we saw that there were 2 questions in that DOK 1. To get a star, they would have to get all of those questions correctly. Otherwise, they get the no symbol. Same with level 2, and with DOK 3, it's essentially worth twice as much of the level 1 and 2 questions because there's that explanation or providing evidence there. So essentially you get 2 stars if you get all of those questions correctly. So if they got the level 2 wrong, and they got some of the level 3 or all of the level 3 correctly, you'll see how that's denoted here. So if they got all level 3 correct, but level 2 wrong, we know that there's probably some issue in some foundational knowledge that we quickly need to correct, and work with the student, provide a little bit of support, so they would get a 2. A student that got 2 or 3 of these, so let's say they got DOK 1 questions correctly, DOK 2 questions all correct, but they didn't get the DOK 3, they're going to get a 1.5. And then a student that just gets 1 of these stars correctly is going to get a 1. If they didn't get any stars, meaning they didn't get a level 2 question correctly, they didn't get any of the level 3 questions correctly, they're going to get either a 1 if they can do those questions correctly with help, or they're going to get a 0 if they just showed no evidence of understanding. Now let's go to if they get it correct. If they get the level 2 correct, again, you still go on to score the level 3 questions. Notice here that if they get 2 or 3 stars, so if they get even like level DOK 1 and DOK 2, they would get a 2.5. If they got all of level 3, but they didn't get DOK 1 and DOK 2, they would still get a 2.5. If they only got 1 or 0 stars, they would be scoring at a 2, essentially at a level 2. If they get all 3 stars correct, then of course you go on to grade their level 4 question. If they get the level 4 question, they get a 4, obviously. Now, we included a little bit of Marzano in this idea of the level 4. Basically, we said you could receive partial credit in the same way that we're kind of taking the subjectivity out of this 2.5 here. We want to take the subjectivity out of the 3.5 here. Basically, they can receive partial credit on the level 4. So if they get part of the level 4 items correct, then they'd get a 3.5. If they get no parts of the level 4, they would get a 3. So that's how we are looking at the grading. What's really interesting that we noticed as we were sharing this out with teachers, we noticed that basically this follows the RTI process, and most of your students that are your tier 2 and 3 students are going to be performing over here. So that kind of tells you and helps you with the grouping of students, whereas your tier 1 and maybe your tier 2 students, if they're not getting any of the level 3s, are going to be more on the right side. And that's true for all of the grading flowcharts. So this is the CSA. Now the CFAs and the sample tasks, they only, so the CFA is level 1, 2, and 3. If a student gets all level 1, 2, and 3, you can go ahead and give them the sample task for level 4. We just assume that most students entering a grade would not be able to ask the above grade level question. So we wanted to make that consistent, and again, make the documents and the time worthy for you. So you would score the level 1 question correct or incorrect, and then you'd go to score the level 2. If the level 2 is incorrect, you'd still go on to score the level 3 the same way you did in the CSA. And notice these are similar to what you did in the CSA. So all 4 stars, they're going to get a 2. 2 or 3 stars, they're going to get a 1.5. 1 star is a 1, and then 0 stars. If they can do these stars with help, they would get a 1, and if they can't, then they're going to get a 0. If they get the level 2 correct, then again, you're going to follow grading the level 3. And again, you want to get 2 or 3 stars, we'll give a 2.5. If they get all stars, they'll get a 3. If they only get 1 or 0 of the stars, they're at level 2, essentially pushing them back to this level 2. So that should provide you with information about how to move forward with teaching students. If you choose to do sample tasks over the CFAs, you would want to, we encourage you to start with giving and scoring the level 2 question on the scale first. And we did that intentionally because any student that didn't get the level 2 question correctly, you can give the level 1 to get some more information to see if they're truly at a level 1 with a star, or if they're kind of operating below grade level and you really need to back up that standard. Additionally, if you give the level 2, You can give them the level 3 questions then next to see if they can get that correctly. Even if they get it wrong, you can give them the level 3. Again, this grading scale is the same as the CFA and the CSA. All 4 stars, they get a 2, 2 or 3 stars, they get a 1.5, 1 star, they get a 1, and they can get a 1 with doing any of the stars with help, or a 0 if they're just not showing that understanding. And similarly, the level 3 questions, you can see this is very similar to the CFA document, which is basically if they get 2 or 3 stars, they're going to get a 2.5. If they get 1 star, they're going to get, or 0 stars, they get a 2. And then if they get all 3 stars, they get a 3. So that means they got the level 1, 2, and 3 correct. Obviously, if you have a student that's doing this, you'd provide them with a level 4 sample task in order to see where to go with them next. Now I'm going to turn it over to Katie, who's going to share with you how these flowcharts kind of are being utilized on Canvas.
Hi everyone, this is Katie Sparks here to talk to you about how you're going to access your materials on Canvas. As you know, you've been accessing your CFAs and CSAs on Canvas for a while now, but we've reorganized things to hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to find everything that you need. Each grade level will have a curriculum resources page that looks like this. When you log into your grade level's curriculum resource landing page, you'll see that we've got all of these different links that take you to different resources within your grade level. At the top right now, you'll notice a quality review checklist and feedback form for spring 2020. Throughout the school year, this link will update so that it's always a live link for you to provide feedback at any time throughout the year. Below that, you'll find your proficiency scales and your pacing guides. And then you'll find your printable CFAs and CSAs with answer keys. This is where you could find the Google Docs that can be printed for your students and for you as the teacher to use as an answer key. And below that, you'll find a link to the Tech Enhanced CFAs and CSAs. Below that, you'll find our adopted curriculum resources in ELA and math. When you click on the proficiency scales link, you'll be taken to a page that looks like this. From here, you can click on either ELA or math proficiency scales. Those would be the scales that Lori and Lauren mentioned earlier. And these will take you to the Google Docs of the scales. On the printable CFAs and CSAs with answer keys page, you'll see 2 tables, one for ELA assessments and one for math. In the left-hand column, you'll find the CFAs, and the right-hand column, you'll find your CSAs. When you click on those links, it will take you straight to the Google Doc that you can either print or use with your students. Now remember, this is not for the Tech Enhanced Canvas piece. This is to get a printable version. So you don't need to import anything. They'll just take you straight into the Google Drive where you can view these documents. When you are ready for the Tech Enhanced part of the CFA or CSA, you can click on the link and it will take you to your modules. We'll have the modules sorted by quarter according to the pacing guide. That hasn't been done yet, so this is just an example. Once we get all of the Tech Enhanced CFAs and CSAs completed over the summer, they'll be sorted here by their quarter. One thing that we've changed a little bit, we are going to have Tech Enhanced assessments in this course, but you're going to be importing them into your own courses. That won't be the case for the printable CFAs and CSAs and the scales. Those you can just access by clicking on the links. But when you're ready to give a Tech Enhanced assessment, you're going to bring that into your course. This is a little bit different than what we did this past school year. As you may remember, we pushed out into your homeroom courses all of the 3rd through 6th grade assessments, and it was just a lot to sort through. We got a lot of feedback that there was a lot of scrolling, there was a lot of stuff in there that you didn't need. So we've organized it a little bit differently now. So what you're going to do is you're going to log into your homeroom or whichever course you're giving an assessment in. So if you departmentalize and you might want to give it to a math class, you would click on your math class, just whatever class you're ready to give an assessment to. Click on that course. Then you're going to go down to Settings and click on Import Course Content. You're going to be importing content from that curriculum course into your course. When you click on that, you'll get this. You'll see a drop-down menu. In that drop-down menu, you're going to want to copy a Canvas course, again, because you're copying from the curriculum course. And then just start typing in your grade level and the word curriculum resources. When you do that, you'll see that the course pops up down below. And when it appears, click on that course. Then you're going to select specific content. You don't want to bring in the entire course. You want to select what you're bringing in. And then go ahead and click Import. You'll see a button on the next screen that says you can select content to import. You're going to want to click on that. And then you have a couple options here. You could select to import an entire module. So you could import the whole first quarter module. That would bring in all of the assessments that are on the pacing guide for the first quarter. Or you could choose to just bring in the few assignments that you need at the time. So if you're ready to give a specific CFA or CSA, you could just bring in that assignment. The one thing that we do not recommend is please don't bring in the entire year's worth of assessments right now. There's a few reasons for that. One, it will give you a whole bunch of quizzes to sort through, and that can get a little bit confusing for you, but also because we learned last year that once things are in your course, we cannot change them at the district level. So if we find a mistake or something that we want to change in, say, a third quarter assessment, we can make that change in the curriculum course. But if you've already brought the assessment into your course, it will not make the change for you. So by waiting, you're always getting the most updated, recent version of that assessment so that if we do find any errors throughout the course of the year, we can make those changes and you're getting those changes in your Tech Enhanced assessments. So for this example, I'm going to bring in a few assignments. So I clicked on assignments and then I'm choosing the ones that I'm ready to give. I just click on their check boxes here. And then I hit select content at the bottom. When you do that, it's going to say queued for a minute. Hopefully this only lasts a minute or two. And then you'll notice that it says running. This means that it's bringing those assessments into your course. When it's done, it will say completed, and you will see that those assessments have been brought into your course in your quizzes tab if you brought over specific assignments, or in your modules tab if you brought over an entire module. From there, the assignments are ready to be published and used with your students. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about grading on Canvas. We had a lot of questions about grading and how the grades that are produced on Canvas align to the 4-point scale. So we did a lot of work using that flow chart that Lauren showed you to get it so that when you're grading on Canvas, the scores that are showing are on the 4-point scale. So there's going to be a rubric that matches that flow chart, and as you're grading on Canvas, you're just going to click on the rubric if students got certain questions right or wrong. And at the end, your score will be out of 4. And this will also translate into learning mastery data, which is a nice color-coded representation of the data that you can use to sort your students for differentiated instruction in your classroom. So you're going to click on the course that you used to give the assessment, and then you're going to click on grades. From there, you'll see a list of your students. I've blocked them out here just for confidentiality purposes. And then you're going to scroll over until you find the assessment that you're ready to grade. You're going to click on the score of the first student. Then you'll notice this little box pops up with an arrow. Click on that box. You'll get this pop-up window, and you're going to click on Speed Grader. So now we're in Speed Grader. As you know, Canvas can grade certain questions for you. It can grade multiple choice, multiple answer, it can grade fill in the blank, but it can't grade things like extended response. So you'll go through and grade everything that needs to be graded by either clicking the green check mark if it's correct or the red X if it's incorrect. Now here's the part that's new. As you're grading the assessment over here on the left, you'll see a rubric on the right. On that rubric, it asks, were the level 2 questions correct? You just click yes or no. Were the level 3 questions correct? Yes or no. If the level 3 questions were partially correct, you can enter a 0.5 over here in this column. And then if all the questions are correct up to this point, you can grade the level 4, and if it's correct, you hit yes or no. So as you're going through and grading the assessment, you're using this rubric. You can also click on these in this column here. It says view longer description. This will give you more information about what you should click, whether you should be clicking yes or no if you're not sure. Once you've finished clicking yes or no in all of these columns, you'll get a score out of 4. So this student got a 3 based on what I clicked up here in the rubric. And then you're going to take that 3 and click on this bottom row of the rubric. I want to talk about this bottom row for a minute. This is called a learning outcome. You have one for each standard that we've created, each of your essential learnings. So each of these learning targets represent one of your essential learnings, and when you click on the student's score, it will take it to the color-coded data that I'm going to show you on the next screen. So for this student, we would say, okay, they got a 3 out of 4. I would click on the 3 for this standard. And then the learning mastery data will end up looking something like this. Now, obviously, this is just an example with some of our district instructional coaches and digital learning coaches in there. But you can see that for each standard, the students are color-coded by how they did, and here's the key over here. You can click on the different colors over here to see just the students that were near mastery or just the students that met mastery, and this can help you with the differentiation in your classroom. We're really excited about this data, and the nice thing too is after you give a CFA, when you go to give the CSA, it will bring it into that same column. So it's keeping the data sorted by standard. The most recent data is the data that will appear in the column. If you have any questions, you can contact your building instructional coach or one of the district coaches listed below. For ELA questions, contact Laura Ely. For math questions, contact Lauren Rapecki-Keenan. And for Canvas questions, you can reach out to me. You can also drop in our office hours on Thursday, May 14th from 2 to 3 to ask questions. There's a Zoom link for that provided in the PD document that was sent out earlier. If you have any other feedback throughout the school year, feel free to use that feedback link on the Canvas page at any time, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. Thanks.